All righty, y'all. Hello and welcome. Welcome, everybody, to our first Season 5 US Cyber Games overview webinar as we prepare to kick things off here in just under 60 days. That's right. Less than 2 months before our Season 5 anniversary campaign kicks off. So really appreciate y'all being here today. As we get started here, just a few kind of housekeeping items. I'll introduce myself here in a minute, but today's session should be very interactive. Certainly encourage you all to use the chat box to throw some questions out there for us to answer at the end. Certainly encourage you all to get familiar with some of the emoji reactions down at the bottom. Throw those out. I love those as we work through our content today. And then last but not least, of course, there will also be some polls that I will launch throughout today's session. So keep your eyes on that. If the polls don't automatically pop up for you in your Google Meet pane, you can find them in the bottom right-hand corner. There's the activities button of the Google Meet interface. It's the triangle, square, circle, sort of PlayStation control vibes down there. You should be able to see the activities there. And then once you pop that open, some polls. So I will launch our first one here as we get started. You're all here. It is Tuesday, April 8th. We're here to talk about our Season 5 US Cyber Games programming. So I will start this off by giving you a little bit of a background on what the US Cyber Games is all about. We'll then move into kind of breaking down some of the myths behind cybersecurity competitions and games, and what our niche here at the US Cyber Games program is all about, and why we talk about things the way we do. We'll also then move into the timeline, which I'm sure is of much interest to many of you as we approach our launch on June 5th. I'll talk a little bit about the International Cybersecurity Competition, or the ICC, which is sort of our Super Bowl, if you will. And then a couple of slides on preparing for success as a US Cyber Games athlete, registering for Season 5, and then, of course, at the end, time for some Q&A. A little bit about me. My name's Brad Wolfenden. I live and work out of Denver, Colorado. I've been on board here with Cat's Eye Play Cyber just about 4 years now. And Jess and I hold this program near and dear to our heart. So Jess is another name you'll see here in the participant list. Jess is the founder of Cat's Eye Play Cyber and the commissioner of the US Cyber Games program. And so Jess and I are really kind of the staff behind the US Cyber Games program that works to organize all of the events, bring in our sponsors, work with the International Cybersecurity Challenge community, so on and so forth. So a little bit about me. I got my start in cybersecurity primarily as a cybersecurity educator, and worked for a couple of platforms that pushed out various training environments, and kind of parlayed that into some work for some large government contractors, specifically working in the training and exercise space, which is a really unique aspect of cybersecurity and highlights some of the kind of non-traditional, non-technical alternative pathways into the world of cybersecurity. Hear it from me, certainly getting your start with a training and or education organization that focuses on cyber is a great way to you yourself learn some of the more technical sides, skills, tools, technologies, etc., in this wild and crazy world. So spent some time building and delivering large-scale cybersecurity exercises for government contractors. And while doing that, the opportunity to create and build the US Cyber Games program with Jess came across my radar, and very quickly jumped on board with that. So I'm thrilled to be here. Like I said, Jess and I hold the US Cyber Games program very near and dear to our heart. There's probably not a question you will ask us about the US Cyber Games program that we cannot answer. So certainly encourage you, like I said earlier on, to drop those questions in the chat, or come off mute towards the end when we get to our Q&A session. All righty. So a little bit of background on the US Cyber Games program. I'm seeing some familiar names here in the participant list. It's great to see you all back. Thanks for joining us today. But for those of you that are newer to the fold here with US Cyber Games, a couple of things to point out. Number one, our mission is clearly stated here on the screen. Essentially, our bread and butter is bringing together talented cybersecurity athletes, coaches, and industry leaders to build a program that redefines cybersecurity workforce development by placing cybersecurity competitions and games at its core. And this is really what Jess and I live and die by. Some things that support that mission statement include defining a cyber athlete. You'll hear a little bit about that on some of the upcoming slides in terms of why we call our participants, our CTFers, athletes. We are also committed to recruiting and training top cybersecurity talents. We do compete in large international competitions every year, and we love having a team that we can send there that we know not only will show up with the red, white, and blue on their backs from a technically competitive standpoint, but also very well-rounded. And so when we look at the athletes that we're recruiting and the talent that we're training, there's a lot of sides to that puzzle in terms of making sure that not only are you all developing those technical skills, but also a lot of those interpersonal skills, those soft skills, those power skills, the cognitive skills, et cetera, are in scope for our season and the training therein. And then finally, we have the pleasure of collaborating globally on a lot of these competitions, games, and other workforce development initiatives. When I get to talking about the ICC later, you'll quickly realize that well over 60 countries participate in that competition. And in delivering that competition, there's a massive effort shared by all of the participating countries to build the events, to build the competition, and all of the activities that go around or that go on around the competition itself. And so collaborating with all of those colleagues across the world, learning about what they're doing from a workforce development perspective, what they're doing from a competition, a recruitment perspective, et cetera, is certainly front and center in terms of a lot of what Jess and I do behind the scenes. Lastly, the U.S. Cyber Games program was founded in cooperation with the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, now goes by NICE. NICE is a program office under NIST, which is the National Institute for Standards and Technology, which ultimately rolls up to the U.S. Department of Commerce, a federal agency there in Washington, D.C. So we do receive some federal funding from the Department of Commerce through their NICE program office, and therefore work hand in hand with a lot of our colleagues there. Many of you might be familiar with NICE from the workforce framework that they've published and continue to iterate on in terms of creating some common lexicon in terms of how we talk about opportunities in cybersecurity and careers in cybersecurity and so on. Taking this one step further in terms of our bread and butter and how we've kind of carved out our niche here at the US Cyber Games program, the US Cyber Games program is dead focused on the fusion of cybersecurity competitions, esports, and athletics. And you'll hear this in a lot of the conversation today, on a lot of the slides in terms of how we talk about our athletes. We talk about seasons, scrimmages, tryouts, tournaments, competitions. We live stream a lot of what we do. There are roles on the team and all kinds of fun stuff. So this fusion is really intentional, and we've chosen this route for many reasons, but I'll highlight a couple of them. First and foremost, it engages new and different populations. I think we're doing really good work to start to demystify some of what a career in cybersecurity looks like, how to get involved, how to take that first step. And a lot of that is due to the presence of cybersecurity competitions and the growing nature of them. They look and feel like so many different things, and I'll speak to that on the next slide. But bringing folks that maybe might not have considered cybersecurity as a career path for them into the fold, and starting to engage with them through our events, through our live streams, through our Discord channels, et cetera, is certainly important there. Educating the broader community of the importance of cybersecurity. This is a big reason why we live stream a lot of the stuff that we do. I think it's really easy for folks that live and breathe cybersecurity from a professional perspective to talk to those around them, whether that's their colleagues, their bosses, their professional networks, their kids even, about what a career in cybersecurity looks like. But when we look at that from the perspective of maybe a K-12 educator or a high school counselor or a religious leader or somebody else of influence in a young person's life, it's much harder to explain what a career in cybersecurity looks like or the types of skills you might want to pursue to those young people that may be considering it than, say, for example, how to become a lawyer or a doctor or fill in the blank. Building a pipeline of skilled individuals, I talked about this already, ready to enter the workforce. And this is that very much multifaceted approach that we take there in terms of doubling down on the technical skills, certainly, but also then ensuring that presentation skills, writing skills, interpersonal skills, cognitive skills, such as endurance, leadership, communication, time management, all of these things are massively important, especially when we start to talk about teams and the role that you'll play on a team if you do end up pursuing a career in cybersecurity. I talked a little bit about how cybersecurity competitions can look and feel like many different things. And so with that, I want to kind of double down here. And in doing so, I'll launch the second poll. So keep your eyes on that. If you don't see it pop up again, you'll find it in the activities pop up in the bottom right-hand corner of your Google Meet pane. You'll see the triangle, square, circle icon. You can click on that and you should see the polls there. But cybersecurity competitions truly come in many different shapes and sizes. They can be virtual, they can be in person, they can be individual or team-based, and can be delivered to competitors at all levels of proficiency. Oftentimes, you'll hear cybersecurity competitions talked about in kind of some pretty traditional formats. And so you'll see some of the more common ones listed here on the screen in terms of your capture the flag. If you've heard CTFs, that's what we're talking about. Most oftentimes, that CTF term comes along with a Jeopardy-style CTF. Think of that exactly like you would a traditional Jeopardy game. So if you've ever watched the old school TV show Jeopardy, you have your categories across the top of the game board. Within each category, there are questions that the contestants are then asked to answer for points. And the individual with the most amount of points at the end of the round or at the end of the game is the winner. So very much the same here with our Jeopardy style capture the flags. You'll see categories like cryptography or reverse engineering or web or OSINT or miscellaneous, for example. And then within each of those categories, there will be challenges that you'll be faced with solving in turn for points. You then have things like King of the Hill, attack and defense, or red versus blue, very much like it sounds like, offensive versus defensive. Sometimes those will be one or the other, an offensive competition or a defensive competition. We focus in on the attack and defense, and so it's kind of that two-way. I like to talk about these oftentimes in terms of much more like basketball than they are like football. And by that, what I mean is in a football match, you have an offensive unit and a defensive unit. And very rarely do individuals play on both sides of that team. And never are those two units on the field at the same time. Whereas in basketball, it's not like that. The same 5 individuals are running up and down the court, playing offense and defense. And so our attack and defense competitions are much more like that. OSINT competitions, I know there's a couple of big ones out there. One of them I think is currently running or just wrapped up. OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. There's some really cool ones out there. If you like perusing, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and all of those platforms for the information that you can find on individuals, OSINT competitions may be for you. Social engineering competitions, policy and strategy competitions. And these are just to name a few. There's tons of others out there. And the reason I like to kind of run through all of the different flavors of cybersecurity competitions is because it really allows you as a potential competitor or as an athlete to find your niche. And in doing so, find competitions that really relate to your skill sets, to your interests. I've already talked about a lot of the benefits of cybersecurity competitions here. One of the ones that I like the most is the second bullet, presenting authentic circumstances and scenarios that prompt skill development. And oftentimes, especially here at the US Cyber Games program, when we're building out our scrimmages, when we're building out our competitions, when we're sending our team to go compete at other competitions, they've all been designed oftentimes hand in hand with our partners and sponsors. And so if you visit our website, you'll see sponsors like MasterCard, you'll see sponsors like Nightwing and Ironbow and many others that help us as we are ideating around the types of challenges we want to build in, ensuring that we're keeping our finger on the pulse in terms of the tested skills, the types of technologies and tools that then get reflected in the challenges. And then therefore your skill sets as you solve those challenges are validated in some ways and provide a little bit of extra tangibility, not just to the partners and sponsors that may be looking to recruit you, but also to you all as competitors, having that tangibility to then go speak to in potentially an interview, on your resume, on your LinkedIn, so on and so forth. All right. Moving forward, just to kind of give you all a recap in terms of our numbers and the participation here with the US Cyber Games program. Now, this was from our US Cyber Open CTF from last year, 2024. And I'll talk about what our US Cyber Open CTF entails here on the subsequent slides. But we had just over 3,100 individuals participate in our US Cyber Open series of events. That was a phenomenal number, much larger than any year we've ever had before. And so we're certainly excited to grow that and continue to see new and different folks join our community and engage with our programming. We managed to tackle all 50 states, DC, and the Virgin Islands, which was massive. Certainly looking to continue to grow that with the US Cyber Open, and I'll speak to this later. It is not limited to US-based individuals or even US citizens. Anyone and everyone, regardless of age, is eligible to participate in that. There are some restrictions in terms of the sanctioned countries from the US government perspective, but ultimately, looking to engage folks from around the world and continue to build up our network, our community in that way. One thing that we're really kind of putting front and center in terms of creating some improvements for season 5 is on this athlete gender breakdown. And we continue to see those numbers become more and more balanced every year. That's certainly credited to all of the work throughout cyberspace in general in terms of highlighting some of those discrepancies and the skewed numbers that we've seen. Some reports show as few as 15-20% of the cybersecurity workforce identify as women and or non-binary individuals. And so we continue to strive to create better balance in terms of that gender equity through various non-profit partners and outreach partners, and getting in front of individuals that might want to join our programming. And by structuring our program in a way that we do, we hope that we can turn some more heads in that way. 52% of our athletes identify as people of color. You can kind of see this athlete age breakdown is very much small, but the bulk of our athletes sit in that 18 to 26-year-old kind of demographic there. But we've had folks as young as 15, folks as old as nearly 70 participating in our US Cyber Open. So I think that's really cool. We take creating an inclusive environment very seriously. And we realize that there are so many different components to diversity and to creating that inclusive, very encouraging community here with US Cyber Games program, including things like age, including things like gender, including things like ethnicity and whatnot. So 75% of our athletes are currently pursuing some sort of higher education degree, whether that's an associate's degree at a community college, maybe it's a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree. 56% have a degree already, and 32% of our athletes in the US Cyber Open had some kind of professional certification. Now, moving forward into the Combine and how that changes, and I'll talk about the differences between the US Cyber Open and the US Cyber Combine here in a couple minutes. The US Cyber Combine is invite only, and this is where we do put some additional restrictions in terms of who can participate. But we had 155 individuals from 32 states in the Season 4 US Cyber Combine. So that was really cool to see the spread there in terms of reaching new and different states and bringing those individuals into that second phase of our season. Athlete gender breakdown slipped a little bit. Athlete age, this is a much more narrow scope. As I mentioned, there are some additional restrictions in terms of eligibility to participate in the Combine. So that breakdown spans from 15 to 25. 63% currently pursuing a higher education degree. 14% were already holders of some kind of degree. 90% had some kind of professional certification. And so you can start to see some of the balance tipping there in terms of where these folks are coming in at from kind of an experience perspective. So a lot fewer of our Combine participants have a college degree, but more of our Combine participants had some kind of certification. And not everybody has, an OSCP or some advanced certification. I'm talking about anything from, a Security Plus, an A Plus, some Cisco networking type stuff in terms of certifications, all the way up the spectrum in terms of those much more technically challenging certifications. And then 31% of our Combine athlete pool identified as people of color. All right, moving into our Season 5 US Cyber Games timeline. Every year we kick off our season with what we call the US Cyber Open. And this has grown substantially over the years as we get ready to launch our Season 5 anniversary campaign. We're really excited to throw some wrinkles in here and introduce some new components to it. So you'll see this referenced as our kickoff series of events. And when we talk about the kickoff series of events, there are 4 primary components. Lily, I'm talking about myself. There are 4 primary components there, and we will kick things off with the traditional virtual kickoff celebration. And that will happen on Thursday, June 5th. And so if you're not already registered, I'll walk you through that process and how to get there. Thursday, June 5th, from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern time, we will host a series of guest speakers, including former athletes and coaches, industry professionals, and other kinds of special guests from throughout the CTF community to present on various topics. And so we'll be filling about 3 hours of live streamed content to deliver you a whole series of wonderful guest speakers, ranging from how to get involved, why to get involved, how to be successful as an athlete, to some really cool latest and greatest type stuff in terms of emerging technologies and stories from the quote unquote battlefields, if you will, folks that have lived and breathed incident response, for example, or have been kind of on the cutting edge of developing new tools and technologies and software to help in the fight, defending our nation, defending their agencies, defending their organizations. So that virtual kickoff will run 3 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, June 5th. We'll then immediately run into our beginners game room CTF. Again, back to that capture the flag, Jeopardy style capture the flag. There will be a series of challenges specifically designed for individuals with little to no experience. And I'll talk a little bit about that. That'll run June 6th through 18th. Cyber Rush Week, June 9th through 13th. And June 9th through 18th is the competitive CTF. So this is just a high level overview. And now let's kind of break down each of those pieces, starting with the US Cyber Open CTFs. And so I mentioned there are 2 CTF offerings here with our US Cyber Open. One is the beginner's game room, exactly as it sounds, intended for those of you that have little to no experience. It's a great place to solve your first ever challenge or challenges. And many of our returning athletes, or those that have participated in previous seasons, those that are on the current US Cyber team or US Women's Cyber team, use the beginner's game room as kind of some warm up to jog their memory, to refresh some of those skills, to start to use some of those tools again, and score some points in the beginner's game room. Again, that will run Friday, June 6th through Wednesday, June 18th. Now, we also offer the competitive CTF. And the competitive CTF will run June 9th, which is a Monday, through Wednesday, June 18th. And so both the competitive CTF and the beginner's game room will wrap up on June 18th. The competitive CTF is just like it sounds. Those of you that might have some more technical skills, those of you that are looking to pursue a spot on the team, those of you that may be looking to be invited to the US Cyber Combine should certainly plan on participating in the competitive CTF. Now, there's a lot of things that go into Combine applications and vetting athletes for the US Cyber team and things, but I don't want to underestimate the competitive CTF results. It's certainly something that we lean on quite heavily, as it is a great snapshot for us in terms of your individual technical skill. To break these down a little bit further, Your traditional Jeopardy style challenges will exist in the following categories. And so this is true for both the beginner's game room and the competitive CTF. That's cryptography, forensics, pwn, or sometimes you'll see that as binary exploitation, reverse engineering, web, hardware, and miscellaneous. And those miscellaneous challenges might look like IoT or mobile. They might look like AI or ML. They could be cloud focused. And so those miscellaneous challenges are kind of some curveballs. Sometimes there's some OSINT. Again, that's open source intelligence gathering. Those types of challenges might find their way into the miscellaneous category as well. And then lastly, of course, what's a competition without some prizes? We will be awarding prizes for the following winners. So one overall champion for the beginner's game room will be awarded prizes. And then there will be more prizes awarded for the competitive CTF. And what those will look like is first place overall, second place overall, third place overall, and then category winners. One individual that takes the cake for each of those categories will be identified as a winner, and all of those individuals will be awarded prizes. So again, beginner's game room CTF, great place to solve your first challenge, great place to warm up. That'll run Friday, June 6th through Wednesday, June 18th. The competitive CTF, much more technically challenging. You can expect some intermediate, but mostly advanced hard challenges in terms of that technical difficulty. It'll run June 9th through June 18th. And this is one to keep your eyes on and to certainly spend some time in if you are looking to pursue a spot on the Season 5 US Cyber Team or the US Women's Cyber Team. With that, I will launch the next poll as we move forward into our next slide. Another component of our US Cyber Open series of events is the Cyber Rush Week. And Cyber Rush Week officially launched in Season 3. This came as a result of lots of feedback that we collected from individuals that were participating in our first and second season through the US Cyber Open. Ultimately, they were just looking for some additional ways to engage, to network, to learn through their experience in the US Cyber Open series of events. And so we created Cyber Rush Week. And this kind of takes a page out of Greek life. If you are familiar with fraternities and sororities and what Rush Week looks like, kind of a similar concept there in terms of we'll spend an entire week. That week will be June 9th through 13th. Featuring one guest speaker each night. And those guest speakers will come on live stream at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, discussing a specific topic each night. And so I met with our first guest speaker earlier today. Actually, a gentleman will be talking about all the cool ins and outs of operational technology and ICS SCADA type stuff. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of the convergence of sort of the physical components of defending a lot of our critical infrastructure and where they meet some of the kind of software-based components of defending that infrastructure. So a lot of operational technology learning on that day and why that's so important in terms of all of the things that we use on a daily basis and sometimes take for granted in terms of electricity and clean water and all kinds of stuff. Monday through Friday, June 9th through 13th will be Cyber Rush Week, and we'll continue to release the names of the guest speakers as those get confirmed, moving closer and closer to our kickoff in just about 8 weeks, sorry. One note here is everyone that's registered for the Season 5 US Cyber Kickoff Celebration or the US Cyber Open CTFs, the Beginner Game Room and the Competitive CTF, will be invited to attend. You'll see a whole series of virtual event platforms get thrown up as you register, and then we move closer to the event. We use Discord, we use Brella, we use a bunch of other things to deliver these experiences to you, and that's how we also run the live streams. Finally, in terms of kind of the initial phases of the US Cyber Game season, we move from the US Cyber Open to the US Cyber Combine. And to break down the US Cyber Combine, the US Cyber Combine is invite only. And the reason that is because as we move towards identifying the individuals that will make up the Season 5 US Cyber Team and the US Women's Cyber Team, we need to work with a smaller group of individuals, a smaller group of athletes, so we can better assess and evaluate their technical skills and their interpersonal or soft skills as it shows here on the screen. So the US Cyber Combine will run July 9th through August 31st. Again, I'll reiterate that this is invite only, and we have to start to apply a few of the eligibility requirements to this phase of the season, because as we look to select our teams, there are age restrictions and citizenship status restrictions in terms of sending athletes to compete on behalf of the US at these international competitions. And so in order to be invited to the US Cyber Combine, there are 3 mandatory steps. One is you have to be between 15 and 25 years old. Number 2 is you do have to be a US citizen, either born or naturalized. And number 3 is you have to submit an application. So those of you that apply for the US Cyber Open fit these eligibility requirements and get an invite to the Combine, to the US Cyber Combine. What you can expect is about a month and a half of very structured, very intensive training, evaluation, and assessment. Again, this is a great way for our coaches and mentors to get to know you all as athletes and the value that you will potentially bring to the US Cyber team or to the US Women's Cyber team. Now, one wrinkle with the US Cyber Combine for this year is that the US Cyber Combine is no longer mandatory. And this is very clearly explained on the application itself. I know we'll get to that here in a couple of slides. But for those of you that are interested in pursuing a spot on the US Cyber team or the US Women's Cyber team, you no longer have to participate in the US Cyber Combine. Now, with that said, it is still recommended that you engage, that you participate, but it is no longer a mandatory requirement. The 3 mandatory requirements in terms of eligibility for either the Season 5 US Cyber team or the US Women's Cyber team include, number 1, you submit an application. Number 2, you participate in the competitive CTF with the US Cyber Open. And number 3, you schedule and conduct an athlete interview. Those are the 3 minimum eligibility requirements to be eligible for the Season 5 US Cyber team or the US Women's Cyber team. So I'll repeat, the US Cyber Combine is highly encouraged. We certainly recommend that you take advantage of this opportunity to get to know your coaches, continue your networking, to continue to build your skills and show them off, but it is not mandatory. All right, moving forward, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but the International Cybersecurity Competition, the ICC, is kind of like our Super Bowl, if you will, in terms of preparing the team and sending them off to compete. The ICC is primarily planned and executed by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, which is ANISA, Play Cyber, which is us, Cat's Eye Play Cyber, and the steering committee. And so the International Cybersecurity Competition is one of 2 international competitions that the US Cyber team competes in annually. This list is continuing to grow. We've been invited to Ireland, we've been invited to Canada, we've been invited to Australia. We get invited all over the world to compete in these CTFs and other cybersecurity competitions. What we know is that every year the ICC will kind of be the capstone for the US Cyber team. Now, the US Women's Cyber team has a has a different kind of Super Bowl, if you will. And I'll speak to those as well. Yes, Chris, great questions. I will get to that. The ICC, as I mentioned, there are well over 60 countries that participate in the ICC every year. Some of those countries participate kind of as standalone teams. For example, you'll see Team Canada, Team USA, and some of them participate as regional teams. For example, Team Asia, Team Africa, Team Latin America. Now, the difference there, it comes down to a couple of different things, but largely it's recruitment, it's funding, and so on and so forth. So the US sends a team to compete in the ICC. That team looks like 15 athletes plus 2 alternates. So for the US Cyber team, we draft 30 athletes. You may be wondering why. So every year at draft day, we select 30 athletes. But when it comes to the ICC, only 17 athletes will travel with the team. All kinds of reasons as to why we draft 30 athletes, but some of them include life happens. We've seen it in the Season 4 team. 1 or 2 of our athletes had to step away from the program due to extenuating circumstances, things much outside of their control. 15 to 25-year-olds, that's a pretty big window in terms of life happenings and things that you're navigating as a human being. whether that's moving away to college, finding your first apartment, maybe getting married, finding a relationship. There's a lot, finding your first job. All kinds of different things come up just in terms of life in that 15 to 25-year-old window. And so we draft some extra athletes to support team training, to keep the competition high, to cover in case folks have to drop out of the program. And also sometimes we get to the ICC at the end of the season and athletes are just not available to travel at that time for whatever reason. So there's lots of reasons why we draft 30 athletes, but only send 17 to the ICC. And keep in mind, the ICC is not the only competition that we travel to. So if for some reason you make the team and you don't get to travel to the ICC, there will be lots of other opportunities to travel throughout the season, whether that's to RSA or Black Hat or other competitions. We do our best to kind of spread the love there and make sure everyone gets involved that way. My last comment on the ICC itself is the competition format. I shared this earlier in terms of how we structure our US Cyber Games training and athlete recruitment and whatnot. But there are two primary days of competition at the ICC. The first being your Capture the Flag, Jeopardy-style CTF, and the second being a hardware challenge, which is a physical device that each team receives one of, kind of like a DEF CON badge, if you're familiar with that. And then there are challenges embedded on that device that work their way into the CTF. Day 2 is an attack and defense, or red versus blue competition. Traditionally, we've seen that look like a Faust-style attack and defense competition. If you're not familiar with that, I can drop a link to kind of a Faust-style attack and defense CTF overview. That's just kind of the name of the game, what we've seen through the ICC planning and steering committee efforts. That's the typical attack and defense format that we conduct at the ICC. To move back towards our chat, I saw some questions pop up. Yes, that photo was from Chile. Good catch. Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
I think Michael just asked a really good question around, is there a training path for individuals to prep to have a better chance to get on the team?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I prepared a slide on some initial suggestions, but that is something that we can speak to. Ultimately, that will come into play more so with the US Cyber Combine, once we have that smaller cohort of individuals. And I should have mentioned this earlier. I'll back up. When it comes to the US Cyber Combine, one of the things that we ask our individuals to do, our athletes to do, is to identify two categories that they want to be considered, that they would consider their specialty areas. In the world of CTFs, you might have heard this as the term main. For example, I'm a crypto main, I'm a forensics main, I'm a web main. We ask our athletes to identify two areas or categories that they would define as their specialty areas. And based off of their specialty areas that they select or that you select, we match you with a senior technical mentor and the other individuals or athletes that have selected your primary and secondary specialty areas for some more targeted training in that sense. Now, in terms of your question specifically, Michael, a training path for individuals, that would start to come into play here. Where we do have a smaller cohort of athletes working through our program and engaging with the lectures, attending trainings, participating in the various challenges and exercises that we put forward. And so that is where the US Cyber Combine is where a more structured, individualized training plan or path would come into play. Great question. Chris, ICC 2025 will be, Jess, are we sharing that?
Yes.
Great. The ICC 2025 will be in Tokyo, Japan. And the ICC 2026, which those of you pursuing a spot on the Season 5 team, that will be in Australia, in the Gold Coast in Australia. So those of you pursuing a spot on the Season 5 team, that will kick off in June. It'll run through May of 2026, which is when the ICC 2026 or the ICC for Season 5 will be held in the Gold Coast, Australia. Scrolling through, thank you, Chris, for talking more about the Faust. Oh, just kidding. Make a deal with the devil. Sometimes, in some ways. All right, moving forward. Preparing for success. This is certainly an abbreviated list, and there's so many things that I would recommend in terms of really kind of leveling up and positioning yourself for success in pursuit of a U.S. cyber team slot or a U.S. women's cyber team slot. And so I'll just kind of go down through here. I don't want to underestimate the get curious, start simple. I think that is some of the best advice I've ever received. Um, One of the most important traits of a successful cybersecurity competition athlete is a sense of curiosity, willingness to dig in, dive in. Even if you don't know it, you have no clue what you're being asked. Maybe it's a tool that you've never used before. Maybe it's some sort of hard math concept for a crypto challenge that you're not so familiar with. Jump in, get curious, just poke around, and start simple. There's a lot of competitions out there, including our beginners game room, things like Pico CTF and many others that really will support those of you that have little to no experience in the field, just to kind of dip your toes in, get your feet wet, and start to kind of get your bearings around you. What is a CTF challenge? What does it look like? What do I need to do in order to access it? All those kinds of things. Get curious, start simple. That's my number one piece of advice to folks that are just getting started. Number two, register for and participate in other cybersecurity competitions. There are cybersecurity competitions almost every week, or sometimes multiple every week. I've rattled off a couple, in terms of Pico CTF is a great place to get your first CTF challenge experience. That one runs what they call, it's not the gym, I forget what they actually call their platform that they leave open throughout the entire year. But there's a dedicated window where they actually run the competition itself, but then they leave the environment open with many of the challenges there that you can poke around and start to solve. There's Cyber Patriot for those of you that are in high school. There's the National Cyber League. There's the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, CCDC. A lot of organizations out there, industry organizations, host their own CTFs. So I recommend for this second bullet here, checking out a webpage called ctftime.org. It lists all of the different types of competitions, kind of who they're intended for in terms of proficiency level, if they're virtual or in person, and some other facts and figures about them. So certainly check out ctftime.org if that's something you're interested in learning more about. Follow content creators on YouTube, Twitter, or X, LinkedIn, etc. We host many of them on our live streams, and it's so cool to hear just kind of how they talk about cybersecurity and what they do. And oftentimes you'll see many of them. I'll just kind of skip over a bullet to this one. Many of them are publishing CTF challenge write-ups on their blogs or on their GitHub repos, where you can go through and just kind of pick their brain, asynchronously, in terms of really looking through their thought process and how they approach the challenge, what kind of tools they've used for certain categories or for certain steps in the solve process. So start to look up various YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn folks. Some of them are talking about CTFs. Some of them are just talking about cool stuff in the news and the latest and greatest in terms of CVEs or zero-day vulnerabilities and how they're exploited and how to patch them. A lot of that is really helpful as you're looking at ways to kind of up your skills from a CTF or attack and defense athlete perspective. Learn what interests you most and find your niche. This I kind of touched on a couple of things. First and foremost, when I was talking earlier about the various formats of cybersecurity competitions, reiterating that there are competitions for those of you that are interested in open source intelligence and finding clues or sometimes even flags on social media platforms or out there on the World Wide Web. There are platform or competitions out there that are social engineering, they're policy and strategy. And so really kind of finding your niche and knowing where your skill sets are, what interests you, is really important in being successful. And then furthermore, if you've kind of gone down that road and you know that, okay, now I really like this crypto category, or I really like this forensics category, or I really like this web category, and then kind of doubling down. It's one thing to be sort of a generalist and have a pretty solid baseline of technical skills, which I certainly recommend and encourage. But even furthermore, if you are able to kind of find that niche and really go down that rabbit hole and develop some pretty niche skills in web, in crypto, in Pwn, in RE, in hardware, whatever the case might be, that's another great way to really kind of prepare for success and find yourself with a role on the US Cyber Team or the US Women's Cyber Team. Build a home lab and tinker away. I can't emphasize this one enough. I think this is massively important. There's all kinds of different devices and things that you can incorporate into a home lab, whether it's physical devices, it's virtualized machines, it's all kinds of things. There's so many great tutorials out there on YouTube. One of our coaches, our CTF coaching lead, Jacob Elliott, has a Udemy course on setting up a home lab and how to go about that. But there's all kinds of other stuff out there about setting up a home lab and what that should look like and the different things that you should build into it based off of your interests or what you want to do with it and whatnot. So certainly recommend starting some kind of home lab and just fiddling with it. Get curious, start simple. Download some of the more common tools and get familiar with them. You'll hear of things like Wireshark, Ghidra. These are just some tools that are pretty common tool sets that get used in cybersecurity competitions. And so maybe you're looking through a published CTF challenge write-up on a GitHub or on someone's blog, and they're talking about some new tool that you've never heard of. Download it, especially if it's open source. Many of them are open source. Many of them are totally free or have some sort of student edition that's free. Download it, get familiar with it, know the ins and outs of it, know when in a CTF you might use it and why. Download those most common tools and get familiar with them. And then attend conferences or local meetups, network with cybersecurity professionals or other cyber interested individuals, whether that's through our US Cyber Open series of events and the Discord channels or the Umbrella environment, or you go on Eventbrite and you see, there's 25 CTF meetups or cybersecurity meetups or AI meetups or, whatever the case is in your local area over the coming month or two. Many of those are also free. Eventbrite's a great place to find some. There's a lot of other event platforms where folks are advertising their meetups and things. Big conferences, the DEF CONs, the RSAs, those are fun. And certainly, if you have the funds to attend those, I encourage you to do so. But they can be pretty expensive and they can be a little overwhelming. So I'll come back to my get curious, start simple. Really, take advantage of some of those local offerings. You'll find B-sides in a lot of local communities. Some metro areas have Google or ISACA or there's so many different organizations that have local chapters. WESIS has local chapters, sometimes even college chapters. That's Women in Cybersecurity. So check out local conferences, meetups, and start to get engaged, start to get involved, meet some people there, pick their brains, see what they're doing to up their skills, to pursue careers, etc. And then finally, sign up for Season 5, US Cyber Games. You can't be successful in the US Cyber Games program if you don't sign up. And so in terms of registering, you're going to want to visit apply.uscybergames.com. If you haven't done so already, you can hit that URL. We have a QR code on one of the next slides as well that you can scan. And we've changed up the process a little bit this year due to some feedback from our athletes. And so we've put up an entire web page that allows you to create an account. And in fact, it doesn't just allow you to, it'll actually force you to create an account and log into it. And in creating an account and logging into it, that will then open up the two different registration forms or applications that may interest you. And so creating an account and logging in also allows you to save your progress and return to it. Specifically on this red one, this is the US Cyber Team and US Women's Cyber Team athlete application. So if you go to apply.uscybergames.com, you create an account and log in, you'll see actually 3 different forms. One that's not shown here is for coaches and mentors that are interested in getting involved in the program. But this first one here in this blue box will get you registered for the US Cyber Open series of events. And so again, that includes the virtual kickoff on June 5th, the beginner's game room starting June 6th, the Cyber Rush Week starting June 9th, and the competitive CTF also starting June 9th. So you'll want to submit that blue box if you want to participate in any of those Season 5 US Cyber Open series of events. The red box here is for those of you interested in pursuing a spot on the teams, either the Season 5 US Cyber Team or the US women's cyber team. And so again, this is a mandatory component to your eligibility. So you'll want to make sure that you put your due diligence into completing and submitting your Season 5 US Cyber Team and or US Women's Cyber Team application. It will ask you to upload a letter of recommendation. It's entirely optional. You'll have the opportunity to upload like a scouting report from NCL, for example, other documentation on CTF challenges maybe that you've authored and deployed, or CTF challenges that you've solved and published a write-up on. Those are all components of the Season 5 and or Women's Cyber Team application. Now, if you are pursuing a spot on the Season 5 US Cyber Team and the Women's Cyber Team, you do not have to submit 2 applications. 1 application is totally fine. You don't have to do this twice. 1 application is totally fine for eligibility for the Season 5 US Cyber Team and the US Women's Cyber Team. One last note on this. We've had some athletes reach out with some confusions around the process. And so once you visit apply.uscybergames.com and you create your account and log in, it'll take you to just your account home. Now, there are 2 ways to go from the account home back to the application forms like you're seeing in this screenshot here. One is at the bottom of your account home, you'll see a blue hyperlink that says back to applications. If you click that, you should land back on this screen here where you'll see the blue, red, and gold boxes, with the blue and the red being probably of most interest to you all as athletes wanting to join the program. The second option is you can just click this icon at the top, the US Cyber Games logo. That'll take you back to the form page as well, where you'll see those 3 boxes. And then, of course, within each of those boxes, there's a tab that allows you to then open the form. Finally, yes, you can save your progress and come back to it. That is the beauty of having created an account and started your application or your registration form, having been logged in, is you can return to your application and complete it at any point. Now, to go back a couple of slides, I will just remind you that the application deadline is Wednesday, June 18th. That also coincides with the end of the US Cyber Open series of events, the Beginner's Game Room, and the competitive CTF. Okie doke, just a couple of closing comments before I open it up to some Q&As. The US Cyber Games program is very active on socials. You can find us on Twitter or X. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So those are our handles and some of the hashtags that we oftentimes use to promote a lot of the happenings here with the US Cyber Games program. Of course, down at the bottom, you'll see this on the next page as well, some QR codes. That'll take you to this one on the left, says sign up to play. This is to register for the Season 5 US Cyber Games, US Cyber Open kickoff events, and then apply for team. This will take you to the application itself for athletes. My contact information is up here. You are more than welcome to get in touch with me via email. You can find me on LinkedIn and or on Twitter or X at PwnSolveWin. With that, that is all I had prepared for you all this afternoon. So I will pause. I didn't see a single emoji reaction the whole time. Saw lots of cool questions coming in through chat. I appreciate you all being so engaged. Happy to start with some questions though. So if you didn't have a chance to, there's some emojis. You did, Lily. Yay, thank you. Now that my voice is hoarse and I need a sip of water, I'm going to mute myself and wait for you to throw some questions in chat and or feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. Okie doke.
Did you want to say anything about coaches and mentors?
Coaches and mentors, yeah, absolutely. The coach and mentor application is still open. I see one of our coaching applicants on today's call, so thank you for joining us. I think you know who you are. We will be reaching out to the first wave of applicants by the end of the day tomorrow to start scheduling those interviews. We intend to conduct the first wave of interviews. And to be clear, each coach and mentor applicant only needs to conduct 1 interview, but we'll work to get those scheduled for the end of the month. And so we'll be reaching out to folks that are interested in joining the coach and mentor team for season 5, which covers both the US Cyber team and the US Women's Cyber team. We'll be reaching out to you all later tomorrow to schedule those interviews and get the ball rolling there. For those of you that are joining, maybe you have a mentor, maybe you have a parent, maybe you have a teacher, maybe you have somebody in your realm that could be a good fit for a coach and or mentor slot on with the US Cyber Games program. And I would love to hear from them. The application process is identical to what I just walked you through in terms of registering for season 5. There is a third box that I just cut off on the screenshot that shows the coach and mentor application. And so we would just have them submit an application and then we will follow up with them. For those of you interested potentially in joining the US Cyber Games program as a coach or mentor, those roles start with kind of a minimum commitment of about 3 hours per month. They are volunteer roles, and we have roles that range for everything from career and leadership type mentors to highly technical, very specialized senior technical mentors in each of the category areas like cryptography, forensics, pwn, reverse engineering, web, attack and defense, etc. So lots and lots of different roles available. We have a phenomenal coach and mentor team that really drives a lot of what we do, if you want to get involved, would love to hear from you. Like I said, everything from helping with observations and taking notes on athletes and their skills, to helping develop challenges, to developing lecture materials and delivering lectures. So yeah, appreciate you, Atet. Thanks for being here. And was there anything else, Jess, about coaches and mentors that you thought was
No, missing? I think that's great.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. Well, in that case, I don't see any other questions coming. Oh, any more info on the U.S. Women's Cyber Team? So we will approach the U.S. Women's Cyber Team draft or recruitment and draft in the same exact form and fashion as the season 5 U.S. Cyber Team. And so we're going to start to marry up those schedules a little bit more. Individuals interested in pursuing a spot on the U.S. Women's Cyber Team should certainly sign up for the U.S. Cyber Open competitive CTF and participate in that. They should also submit an athlete application. And then as we get through all of this, we'll be reaching out to individuals that have submitted an athlete application to get their interviews scheduled. In terms of the draft for the season 5 U.S. Cyber Team and the U.S. Women's Cyber Team, I believe we will be conducting both simultaneously the week of September 22nd. I just realized I left that date off the slide deck, so I apologize. I believe the U.S. Cyber Team and U.S. Women's Cyber Team draft event will be Thursday, September 25th, but I will confirm that, and it'll be on our events page on the website. And at that event, my understanding is that we intend to announce the selections for both the season 5 U.S. Cyber Team and the U.S. Women's Cyber Team. Continuing to kind of operate both in parallel with lots of opportunities for joint training camps, joint experiences in terms of scrimmages and other things like that across both. Obviously tapping into the coach and mentor team for both as well. I don't yet know where the women's cyber team Super Bowl equivalent will be for the season 5 timeline, but that'll be fun news to share when we have it.
They will likely be a weekend following the ECSC in Warsaw, sometime in October.
Right.
For women, for a couple of the women.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There are a lot of events where we bring the U.S. Cyber Team and the U.S. Women's Cyber Team together for things, and then there's also events where it's just the U.S. Women's Cyber Team or just the U.S. Cyber Team. One of those that Jess was just sharing about is every year after the European Cybersecurity Challenge, we tend to send athletes from the U.S. Cyber Team to go compete in that competition, but then immediately after is an all-female an all-female boot camp over the weekend. And this year's ECSC will be in Poland. I believe for the season 5 team, the ECSC will be in the Netherlands. I reserve the right to be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's in the Netherlands. All right. that is all I had prepared for you. We are about at time, so I will stick around for a few more minutes in case any other questions pop up, but I will go ahead and end the recording. First and foremost, thanks so much for your time this afternoon, for your interest in the US Cyber Games program. I sincerely hope to see many of you in the series of events that we'll be launching on June 5th. If you have any questions on any of that, feel free to reach out to me via email, via LinkedIn, and or Twitter. You're welcome to ping me on any of those channels. The QR codes, again, the one on the left here will take you to the US Cyber Open series of events registration form, and the one on the right here, apply for the team, will take you to the athlete application for both the Season 5 US Cyber team and the US Women's Cyber team. Bye, Lily. You have a great day, too. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you in some future events. Have a wonderful rest of your day.